Welcome to The Freight Break with your host, Dan Lindsey, the podcast that cuts through the noise of the trucking industry. We're talking real conversations, real relationships, and real insight that keep the wheels turning.
Hey, how's it going, everyone? This is Dan Lindsey, host of The Freight Break and president and founder of the Broker Carriers Summit. Got a special episode of The Freight Break for you today. Obviously, we are in full-blown planning mode for our upcoming event in Orlando next week, but I wanted to make sure we continue to provide valuable content to you, so I wanted to give you something special today. Back in April at the BCS in Indianapolis, I had the honor of interviewing the governor of my state, Indiana, Governor Mike Braun. We talked about transportation, talked about business, talked about life. It was really a good conversation. I had a couple of slip-ups. I called him the governor of the crossroads of Indiana, which of course means, it should be the crossroads of America, but who's actually paying attention, right? Anyway, hope you find the content valuable, and don't forget, there's about a week left to sign up for the Broker Carriers Summit in Orlando. If you've not yet signed up, we still have room for you. Head on over to brokercarriersummit.com or the bcsfreightnetwork.com to learn more. Hope to see you there.
Meet TIE Software's workflow automation, built to help LTL and FTL freight brokers boost productivity. Use custom prompts to automate repetitive tasks like status updates, carrier changes, and shipment alerts right in the platform. Manage operations with automated scheduling, carrier management, and real-time updates. Workflow automation removes bottlenecks, freeing you up to grow your business. Best of all, it's easy to set up and use. No coding or tech skills required. Choose your workflows and TIE does the rest. Book a demo today and see how TIE makes efficiency happen.
It is my honor to introduce our next speaker. He is a man who has spent his career as a Main Street entrepreneur in the logistics and distribution industry, building a business that has created thousands of jobs before being elected to the U.S. Senate in 2018. After graduating from Jasper High School in 1972, he attended Wabash College, where he graduated summa cum laude with a degree in economics and as student body president. He then married his high school sweetheart and moved to Boston, Massachusetts, where he earned his MBA from Harvard Business School, after which he chose to move back to Jasper and raise a family and build a career. In 1981, he took over a farm equipment manufacturer called Meyer Body, and over the next 20 years, he lived the life of a small business owner. In the early 2000s, Meyer began to grow into a national company, and over the years has come to employ thousands of people across over 38 different states. He began his public service as a member of the local school board, served as a state representative from 2014 to 2017, before being elected to the U.S. Senate in 2018. And while in D.C., he led over 40 bills into law and was named the most effective first-term Republican senator. He is an avid outdoorsman, is guided by the values of faith, family, and community, and has been married for 48 years to his wife, Maureen. And together they have 4 adult children and 7 grandchildren. Please welcome the 52nd governor of the state of Indiana, the Honorable Mike Braun. Governor Braun, thank you for joining us today.
My pleasure.
I know it's the end of the legislative session, so I know your time is extremely limited, so appreciate that very much. Thank you for your time. As the newly elected governor of the state known as the Crossroads of Indiana, what does that mean to you, specifically when it comes to logistics and transportation?
Crossroads of America. So it's, for me, I drift back to those days when we decided to move back to our hometown of Jasper and get involved with that little business that was wobbly, circling the drain within about 6 months, because most of those beds that they were building were for farmers and they had become a dealer for it. And I remember once I get there and started trying to market them, and the headwinds were so strong, and then ended up 80% of our business disappeared overnight with a lot of the farms then that went from 80, 160 acres and farmers going to tandems and then eventually tractor trailers. And we got caught up in all that. And I started doing a milk run on truck accessories when trucks didn't even come with bumpers. It was that crude. And so we had to start a business to keep the other one alive. And not to mention, with a fancy MBA, the thing that did the best for us was selling used trucks and equipment. So here you are in a place that looked like a dump to begin with, took that big dip. It took 17 years to get out of a single wide trailer as the office. And that's when we started scaling into selling truck accessories regionally and then eventually nationally. And hired that first truck driver out of our own body shop. He was tired of painting, and he just retired about a year ago. So blessed with a lot of loyal employees along the way. And we now have about 500 power units across the country. About 80 to 100 of them are tractor trailers, all the way down to 2-ton trucks with lift gates and sprinter vans. And I see Gary is in the audience here, Langston, who runs Indiana Motor Truckers Association. We're a member of. And it's one of those journeys where everything I told you, there wouldn't be more than a handful, if not less, of senators that have come from that, kind of Main Street approach. And I think our country suffers from it. And at least in a state like Indiana, being a governor that's had an entrepreneurial background, it comes in real handy when you're trying to, weigh in on these issues that are important to all of us.
And that's one of the things we've talked about a couple of times before is the transition from the business world to the political world. Talk to us about the challenges that you faced crossing that aisle. We'll talk about crossing other aisles in a minute.
Well, for all of you that want to retire early and get into politics, give me a call someday. Most people laugh at that or say you need to have your head examined, but you want to do it in that order, because in the U.S. Senate, when I got there were only a handful of us again. I was on the agriculture committee. I built a sideline business in row crops and tree farming. Tree farming's good therapy if you ever want to get into politics, but you knew a lot about the content. And for most senators, they didn't know anything about the committee they were on. And you know who they had to consult? A 20 to 30-year-old staffer that had to look it up on Google. So that's not the way the system should work. The founders put it in place when they lived through all that. They knew what they were getting into, and they did it from that deep experience. So it was a blessing to have cut your teeth doing something in the real world before you wanted to get into politics. And that was a little bit unintended, in that I got on our local school board when that call came from my wife, not me. I was going to kid her why she didn't get on the board, plenty of time. Well, she's had her own business as her only job for 47 years in our downtown home accessory and gift store. Couldn't do it. And then she offered me up. So I was there 10 years and then never thought I'd get here, because it took a local state rep called me when he wanted to run for state senate. That got me into our legislature back 10 years ago in 15, 16, and 17. And then I saw so many things I didn't like in D.C., and that's where everybody thought that was a fool's errand. But had I not had that preparation in the real world, that would have been a waste of time.
Yeah. You mentioned the different standards and changes in standards when it comes to equipment over the years. One of the things that's on everybody's mind, especially in the logistics industry, is safety. How do you view things like age requirements? English proficiency is a big conversation point right now, as well as visa status when it comes to over-the-road safety.
Such a tricky issue, because the thing I hear most from people in the trucking business would be the liability that's associated with owning a trucking business due to, well, in Indiana, I think the most popular billboard is somebody called the Hammer, and liability suits are getting way out of hand. If we're not able to rein that in to where they're not in the category of being nuclear, we're going to lose a lot of companies. Our insurance is going to get so expensive we can't afford to do it. So that is something in Indiana, being the crossroads of America and knowing so much about the trucking business, I need to find what that proper level of regulation is, risk management, and make sure that that element of owning a trucking company doesn't overwhelm you to where you choose maybe not to do it because you can't deal with that.
Yeah. Speaking of regulation, it's the dreaded R word, depending on what side of the aisle we're on. Fraud prevention is a huge topic right now as well, and regulation around that is difficult to grasp. I remember when you were in the Senate, you wrote a letter, I believe, to the OIG of the DOT urging the creation of a specialized unit for, I think it was, let me see here, investigation and referring prosecuting fraud cases. That was years ago. Why does it take the federal government so long to get their acting in line? And what can the states do, if anything, to help prevent the rise of fraud?
Well, right now you can see the wrestling match. Just turn on the TV each evening, and there's one side of the aisle that's actually doesn't think fraud and abuse is maybe something you need to go after because it would actually thwart maybe some political things they want to do. I would hope in Indiana that from all the resources here and the number of trucking companies that you bring that to my governor's office. I'm going to get along with the state legislature. And when you're not for eliminating waste and fraud in something, you're trying to cover up other stuff. And that is rampant in D.C. Here, I don't understand the logic of it. We'd want to make sure that doesn't occur. Then it would be up to an enterprising governor with an enterprising legislature to make sure we eliminate that. It's hard enough yet to have to contend with fraud to boot.
Yeah, I agreed on that. So another big topic in the industry and the economy as a whole right now is tariffs. I'm curious to get your thoughts as a businessman at first and politician later on in life. How should the logistics and freight industry be viewing the conversations and the events around tariffs removal?
So unless your logistics business is highly related to containers and trade, every economy needs ours. As long as we don't ruin it through $37 trillion in debt that's being done by our own senators and representatives and the presidents that we've had both sides of the aisle. Trump is wrestling with that now. So as long as we don't completely hit the ditch, this is all stuff since World War II that we've allowed to happen to our own country, which was made up of people that gave their lives to defend our freedom, had the biggest debt in our country's history, paid it off, and built the interstate highway system. That's because they were savers, investors, hard workers. I don't know that we can use any three of those to describe what our country has morphed into. So trucking is going to be needed as long as our economy stays strong. And unless we do the things that they're tackling now, unless you think it's a good business plan to borrow $2 trillion a year from our kids and grandkids, terrible business plan, we're at the point where that could swamp us. And on the trading account, we rebuilt the world, which was healthy. Because a trading economy, if it's free and fair, makes sense. But that trading account is now to where you got $1 trillion a year going out the wrong way. So no doubt about it, if we don't fix it now, it'll get worse. It could get unfixable. And that's when it starts to shake our whole economy. But when it comes to moving things from here to there, Indiana's the crossroads of America. We're the place that other economies need more than we need them. We just got to get smart and not let it get too far the other way before it becomes a burden. And then we'll need fewer trucking companies because our economy is weaker. Getting away from a trading economy that's draining resources is healthy in the long run.
Gotcha. What role do the states play when it comes to shaping federal transportation policy? Is there anything that we can do at the state level to help the industry move forward?
So a lot of that, since it's got federal nexus, is going to end up being a federal issue. Then it means you got to get 60 senators to agree. Well, try getting 60 senators to agree. It's hard to get them to agree on getting rid of waste and fraud.
Try getting 60 freight brokers to agree on anything.
Well, it's like wrestling or herding a bunch of cats, but that doesn't mean the states can't weigh in with good ideas. And when it comes to having latitude on what you can do as a state, in terms of what are you going to do you want folks to wait until they're 21 if they've really got the skills to do it at a younger age? If we need federal permission to do it, we're going to need folks, governors that are used to dealing with the feds. We need to do everything we can on our own to let common sense and practicality win the day. And when it comes to running into the federal government, it's hard to bucket on some stuff. Transportation would be one of the hardest. That's where having a relationship like I've got, spending 6 years there, knowing how it works, getting along with an administration that's there, it may be a rare opportunity to get some stuff done that we haven't been able to do by weighing in from a place like Indiana that's considered common sense and practical. And I'll use the microphone and the power I have as governor to try to get some of this stuff done and be a spokesman for it. And we'll see what happens, I guess.
You mentioned the labor market. We hear a lot about driver shortages and skilled labor gaps. What efforts is Indiana making to build and support the next generation of logistics talent?
Thing that I was most disappointed with when I was on our local school board happened to come from the biggest manufacturing county in town per capita in our state, with a lot of trucks in it as well, several trucking companies. But I found out that the employees that we needed most, truck drivers, smart kids that could step into a warehouse job and then start working their way up the ladder, our guidance counselors were guiding against it. They were telling our kids the only way you can be successful is go after a 4-year degree, regardless of whether we even had a need for it in our state. We've now got diplomas that are geared for employment right out of high school. I've got school districts I've visited that are doing CDLs on their high school campus. And if you're the crossroads of America and where most trucking companies are headquartered out of, we need to make sure we're not losing that moment of opportunity, because finally higher ed now realizes pushing kids into a degree that has no market in your state, forces you out of state to get a job or back into the basement. That's not a good plan. So we've turned that around in Indiana, and I'll make sure that we make hay while the sun shines to be able to get Indiana in a place where our education, middle school through high school, is aimed at the high demand, high wage jobs, and many of them will not involve a 4-year degree, even a 2-year degree. It'll involve a better high school education.
So there's a conversation going on in not only the freight industry, but in every industry right now when it comes to the balance between automation, technological innovation, while still supporting the labor force. How do you view that when it comes to, as you mentioned, the backbone of America, drivers?
That's a complicated subject because the average age of a driver is near that of a farmer. They're not spring chickens on the average. Technology, ironically, not robotics and unmanned vehicles, but technology in general, when it comes to running your business with more precision, we've leveraged it. So you've got to embrace it, but that doesn't mean you got to embrace it to the full extent of where you may end up with something that doesn't work as well. Once technology starts working and it clearly is a better mousetrap, we're not there. I don't know how we'd even navigate through a interstate system that needs a lot of upkeep and repair before you could start pushing it, or the crazy idea through the Green New Deal that look at how much an EV-powered semi would cost. Well, it's a joke. So when things are a joke and you can't afford it, don't ever say, well, it'll never happen, but also don't be stupid to where you think it can work in the short run when it's proven that none of that's going to work. So we got plenty of upside potential. Now, if we could get educators talking about earning a CDL, getting into that as being a good way to start to make a living, if not build a career, I feel good about all those opportunities. Technology is always a double-edged sword. Be careful that you don't go overboard with it. When its time comes, you got to deal with it accordingly.
So here at the Broker Carrier Summit and the BCS Freight Network, we are all about partnerships between brokers and carriers. If you're coming from the transportation industry, I'm sure you know the dynamic between freight brokers and carriers. It's not always the greatest. One of the things that you had a reputation for over the years, not just in business but also in politics, is being able to reach across the aisle and form partnerships and get, for lack of a better word, get shit done. Okay. So how do you
like that? That's practical. Get it done.
Yeah, get it done. So what kind of best practices or recommendations would you give to us in the freight industry on how we can emulate those?
So when I was in the Senate, I got that done. And as a freshman Senate office, you're told to say nothing, listen, and be there till they got to wheel you out of there after 2 or 3 decades, not even 2 or 3 terms. So I found a way, and I was never going to be for something where we borrowed the money to do it. But good ideas can come from both sides of the aisle. The other side generally wants it heavy with regulation. They want to borrow the money to do it. Republicans are flat-footed and don't even think about how to use government to promote freedom, opportunity. Less government, more effectiveness through the private sector. I took all of that and learned the system, and we were able to get more bills passed 3 years into it. So Democrats are not going to give us more government because we're digging that hole too deep already. Republicans are going to have to get more involved and not be the party of no on everything. It's going to have to be the party of practicality and good ideas. And Democrats are going to maybe have to consider taking Finance 101. So there's still a lot of room in between to where we'd find practical things. What makes it easy to get freight from here to there? It's a part of our world. And that working across the aisle can be done. I was glad to where I could at least show an example of how that might work.
Yeah. Thank you for that example. Appreciate that. So what advice would you give to the freight professionals, transportation professionals in the room today who are trying to visualize and enact company growth, leadership, as well as leaving a legacy in the industry?
Well, all I can tell you is you're in a business that's absolutely needed. That's never going to go away. It is, if not the most competitive industry and job God created, I don't know what would be close to it. You got all kinds of levels of size. And so I don't, even some of the things we've talked about where it sounds like there are headwinds, you're doing something that's essential. We know there's a threat of technology weaving its way into it. But in the meantime, as the governor of Indiana, the crossroads of America, we're going to be doing a lot of things that's going to distinguish us from the other 49. And sooner or later, there'll be enough states, the way the founders intended it, to actually solve these issues. And then it'll rub off on the big house that seems to get everything wrong. So don't lose heart. Be optimistic. 3 of my 4 kids now run a business I did for 37 years, and we've grown it at roughly 15 to 17% a year, and 1/3 of the company is trucking. So it can be done. You may need to think out of the box. We're hauling our own profit down the road, not just doing it, for the freight fare. That's the way I approached trucking, but I chose to have my own trucking company rather than hire it out, and it's just another way to skin the cat. So you got to think broadly out of the box. And hopefully government doesn't make our collective job that miserable and difficult. And something's got to be done about the liability associated with driving a truck that impacts all of us.
All right. Thank you very much for your time. I have one final question. I read somewhere that I believe you are an avid morel mushroom forager. Is that true?
I am. I hunt mushrooms every year, and that business is getting tougher because it doesn't seem to rain enough or be the right temperature. So I hunt about 8 or 9 others and just morels. And by the way, there are some people that have figured out how to grow a lot of the tasty mushrooms, culture them in their own businesses, but they haven't figured out morels yet. So I'm not going to tell you where I hunt, but I give it a whirl every year. Thank you so much for listening. Appreciate it.
Thank you for your time. All right, everyone, that's our show for today. Thank you very much for tuning in. If you found it valuable, give us a like or subscribe. Until next time, have a great week.